Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles and on this episode we're doing a top 10. Topic for the top 10? Top 10 unpopular wrestling opinions or unpopular wrestling takes or hot takes, however you may say it. Basically, these are my wrestling opinions that I don't think a lot of wrestling fans agree with or are somewhat controversial. For the purposes of this top 10, the more controversial they are, the closer they're going to be to the top. So as we get down, they're going to be more and more, not necessarily controversial, but not agreed with, I guess. That being said, let's jump right into it with our number 10. I believe that every wrestler should have 4 different finishers. And I'll explain this. In a world where we have MMA and people have seen MMA for 30 years and know what a real fight looks like, if you watch MMA, there's not finishers in MMA. You could win a match with a knockout, win the next match with a knee bar, win another match with a rear naked choke. So I think you need to incorporate that in wrestling. Now, that's not to say you don't still have your signature stuff. MMA fighters still do. My theory is this: with the 4 finishers, you have one that's a striking finisher, something like a super kick or a lariat, a spinning back fist, a Judas effect elbow, something to that effect, a submission hold like a figure 4, scorpion deathlock, camel clutch, something of that effect, a regular finishing move like a pile driver, an RKO, go to sleep, moves of that nature, and then for the special occasions where you're in the end of a feud and you're in a grueling long match, this is kind of borrowing from All Japan in the 90s. You have what I call a super finisher. So if you're familiar with the moves like the Burning Hammer or the recently used by Will Ospreay Tiger Driver 91 or Dr. Death's Backdrop Driver, these were moves that were created above their finishers. So they would have a normal finisher. Then you would also see this move if they needed to break out something that's going to be absolutely positively going to end the match. I think that wrestling incorporating something like that, like an absolute, this is it, there's no coming up back from this. In a world where we have multiple kickouts and finishers and very few finishers being protected or as protected as some of these finishers were, I think it would be awesome to say, like someone like a Kenny Omega had a move that he only pulled out on a rare occasion when he needed it. Like let's say he was facing Danielson or Okada or another super top of the line talent, and vice versa. Okada only has a move that he busts out when he wrestles Danielson or he wrestles Will Ospreay. Or even if you go into the WWE, Cody Rhodes has a move that he only busts out when he wrestles Brock Lesnar or Roman Reigns. Brock has a move that he only uses against Cody or Roman or anybody that's up in that upper echelon, and they're always lights out. That's what I mean by when I say a super finisher. It gives more meaning to those matches while also showing the loser in a light that's more favorable. Even though they lost, it took them being taken out by basically a super move, a super finish. Just my opinion, something I think that would really enhance pro wrestling. Number 9, I'm probably going to feel the flames on this one. I can feel them already coming from the comments, and I haven't even released a video yet. Cesaro never grabbed the brass ring. I know, throw the hate on me. This is no knock on Antonio Cesaro, aka Claudio Castagnoli. He is a wrestler that I thoroughly enjoyed. I love watching and loved watching all through his WWE run. One of the big knocks was Vince McMahon's reluctancy to push him. Even Stone Cold famously in a podcast asked McMahon why Cesaro hadn't reached the top, and he said he hasn't grabbed that brass ring. Now ring-wise, yeah, definitely. There's very few people in ring that are as good as Antonio Cesaro, or just Cesaro. That's without question. For the WWE style, though, he was lacking in a few areas. His run with Paul Heyman was kind of lackluster. His promo skills have never been great. They're passable. I'm not saying he's bad. But you're telling me, could you see Cesaro in the Bloodline feud? Could you see Cesaro as the leader of Judgment Day like Finn Balor has picked up and become? Could you see Cesaro talking like Kevin Steen does? Or John Cena? There's also the concept of Cesaro was never a big merch mover. And if you don't think that means a lot in the world of WWE, you haven't been paying attention. If you notice, the people that have been in the main event, good merchandise or bad, have more often than not been in the top 3 or 4 merchandise sales. Whether that be Roman Reigns right now, Cody Rhodes right now, historically guys like John Cena. There is one surefire way, other than the reaction he gets, to know that a crowd is responding to a wrestler, and that is by the merchandise they sell. Unfortunately, Cesaro never moved merchandise. I gotta say, I'm being perfectly honest here, he never grabbed the brass ring. And other than his team with Sheamus in the bar, who arguably, Sheamus has grabbed more of the proverbial brass rings than Cesaro did. Just saying, throw the hate at me. I know this is not a popular opinion, hence why it's on this video. Just my opinion, I don't think that Cesaro ever grabbed the brass ring in WWE. Now, our number 8, probably gonna get flamed for this one. I'm gonna say that probably everyone here. Wrestlers need to stop trying to impress Dave Meltzer. Look, I'm just as excited as Dave when I see a classic Okada Naito match from the G1 or Ospreay and Omega at Wrestle Kingdom. But as Chris Van Vliet put it, Kenny Omega has 20-something 5-star matches. No knock on Kenny. I love Kenny. Kurt Angle has 0. Kurt Angle. You can't tell me that there's not at least 5, 10, 20 matches that Kurt Angle was in that didn't deserve a 5-star? You're telling me none of the matches he had with Shawn Michaels, Chris Benoit, yeah, I know he's a pariah, I get it, Samoa Joe, none of them deserved a 5-star? Are you kidding me? I do get that his name carries something and his 5-star ratings carry something, they have a cachet, but too often do we see wrestlers at the expense of their own match trying to impress Dave Meltzer. Not everybody can do what Rey Fenix does. Not everybody can work matches like the Young Bucks. A lot of times a team that wrestles like the Young Bucks is not going to be as successful as the Young Bucks because there's something more to the Young Bucks than just that style. It's one of those things I just think that gets too much stock put in it by the wrestlers themselves. Now, going from this, our number 7. WWE needs to retire the Money in the Bank briefcase. The concept's run its course. It's not new. It's not innovative. It's not special anymore. More often than not, it's unimpressive when it does get cashed in. It's unimportant when it gets cashed in. It's forgotten about rather rapidly. You could just as easily run a yearly King of the Ring and have a similar payout without that Money in the Bank briefcase being a stipulation. And yes, I know that the matches, the Money in the Bank matches, are usually super fun, really good matches. The concept itself, to me, has just became passe. Now, that's not to say if they didn't rework it and take away the challenge for a championship aspect. Like, here's an idea to rework it that I think would be interesting. Every year at WrestleMania on the undercard, there's a Money in the Bank match with 2 briefcases, one for Raw, one for SmackDown, and the match is all NXT talent. And you can probably guess where I'm going from here. If you grab the Raw briefcase, you're getting a contract to move up to Raw. If you get the SmackDown briefcase, you get a contract to move to SmackDown. That's another way to keep it interesting without having that when is he going to cash in moment. I know there's some good stuff. I think right now, currently, at the time I'm recording this, the inner turmoil between Judgment Day with Finn Balor and Damian Priest is pretty good television. But I don't know. Overall, I think it's a concept that's ran its course, that's done its time. Maybe do it every 4 years, make it like an Olympic thing. I don't know. It just, to me, it's not as important as it once was. Going from that, our number 6. I told you these are going to get more unpopular as they go along. Owen Hart was better than Bret Hart. Now, don't get me wrong. Bret Hart is a legend. He deserves being a legend. I personally never was what you would call a fan of Bret Hart. I respected Bret Hart. I liked matches that Bret Hart was in. I never really was a big fan of him. Now, Owen, on the other hand, I loved Owen Hart. From when he was the Rocket to when he had the heel turn, and even after Bret left WWF. I always thought Owen was a better wrestler. And when I say wrestler, I mean everything involved. In the ring, he was just as good as Bret. Bret might be a step better in the ring. I'll give Bret that. But Owen was way better on a promo. Owen was way more convincing as a heel. I think if we would have seen more of him in the Attitude Era, we would have seen a turn of Owen as a super babyface that I thought would have been awesome. His style to me was a little bit more fast-paced, more akin to what we were seeing with like a Shawn Michaels, who I liked a lot better than Bret Hart. And again, not knocking Bret, he's awesome. I just think in the pantheon of Hart family members, Owen Hart's the better of the two. Now going from that, our number 5. Talking about brothers, Jeff Hardy needs to be blackballed from wrestling. I'm not knocking Jeff Hardy, the wrestler. I think he's a great wrestler. He's a legend. He has all the accolades that any wrestler would love to have. The reason I'm saying this, the guy has had chance after chance after chance after chance, and he keeps messing. He keeps getting drunk. He keeps getting high on drugs. He keeps getting arrested. Much like Sonny, Tammy Sin, it's only a matter of time if he keeps going down this road before Jeff kills himself or somebody else. And I hate to say that. I don't want to be this negative. I think professional wrestling is enabling him, and I know why you sign him. I know why you want him on the roster. There's probably less than 2 handfuls of guys that move the needle more than Jeff Hardy does. He's got super fans. I just think at this point in his career, the risk versus the reward is more on the risk side. Now, that's not to say that Jeff can't have a redemption arc like Jake Roberts has had or Scott Hall has had. I really hope that happens. He has not shown me at any point for a long enough period of time that that is something that's going to be possible, at least at this time. Again, I really hope it does happen. And until he does, until he can really show that, I don't trust him going down the road. I don't trust him being allowed to be in a locker room and being allowed in a hotel room. And again, if you think this is a harsh criticism, think about your job. How many times would you have to be arrested before you lost your job? It's probably not more than 1 or 2. How many DUIs would you have before you were given a job where you travel all the time and it's probably necessary that you be in a car? Not too many. How many drug tests can you fail before you're run out of your industry? Let's say you're a roofer and the city you live in has 10 roofing companies. Let's say you get fired from one because of drug-related issues. You go to another one that hires you because you're a good roofer. Then you get fired from that one for a similar reason. Now you go to a third. You have the same issues on the third one. It's going to be a very short time before that word gets around to all 10 of the roofing companies, and this is just random numbers, that you're not trustworthy, that you're not reliable. And that's the problem we have with Jeff Hardy. I do apologize. I know. I wish we didn't have this problem. I wish Jeff Hardy was straight edge like CM Punk or Darby Allin. And again, I'm not knocking a guy because he enjoys drinking or doing drugs. Whatever you want to do in your own life, fine by me. Just don't put other people's lives in danger, which is obviously what he does every time he gets behind the wheel of a car. That's all I'm going to say on this subject. I hope you understand. That's my opinion. I think Jeff Hardy, for the meantime, should be run out of wrestling. I'll go from that on number 4. Roddy Piper was just as important to the growth of WWF as Hulk Hogan. And here's where I come to this conclusion. Let's roll our time clock back to 1984. Who else in the WWE on the heel side is going to be able to get onto MD? Who else is going to draw that kind of heat that Piper had? Let's talk about the people that were there. Paul Orndorff? Maybe. Probably not, though. He couldn't talk anywhere on the level that Piper could. Bundy and Studd, they had Heenan. That's a possibility. Heenan himself may have been that guy. Don Morocco, as much as I love Don didn't have the same connection that Piper did. Piper was such a great heel, and the Piper's Pit segments were so revolutionary. I mean, just think of the fact that everybody tries to repeat this to this day. It's the same reason why Batman has better movies than Superman. Batman has better villains. The Joker, the Riddler, Catwoman, the Penguin. Whereas Superman has Lex Luthor, who's a great villain, but realistically, Superman would destroy him. I mean, he's got God power. Joker and Batman are more even. Piper and Hogan were more even. And if we're talking strictly kayfabe, at the time, I would say Piper was more OP than Hogan. I mean, Hogan did not have wins over Piper. Piper had wins over Hogan. I think he's absolutely just as important to the rock and wrestling era as Hulk Hogan was, and he should be lauded just as much as Hulk Hogan is. And I know he's got a heap of praise on him. A lot of people consider him one of the greatest heels of all time. I just think he should be considered in the conversation with one of the greatest draws of all time, because without Piper, Hogan's not as popular. Without WrestleMania 1, we don't get WrestleMania 3. At WrestleMania 1, is built squarely on the back of Roddy Piper, Hulk Hogan, Mr. T, and all the periphery people around. Just my opinion on it. I might be wrong, just how I feel. Now, Future George here, when I originally recorded this, I skipped over number 3 somehow. So that's why you see I have a totally different shirt. I'm recording this on a different day. I only realized it during editing. So, with that being said, our number 3, Kane was better than The Undertaker. Much like my Bret Hart, Owen Hart earlier assessment, this one's probably purely on my enjoyment of Kane over The Undertaker. Now, don't get me wrong. I love The Undertaker. We all love The Undertaker. He's one of the most revered legends in wrestling. But to me, the Kane character, the character arc, the different changes in him, the amount of absolute dog shit he was able to turn into gold made Kane a better character for me. I like the Kane character better. I love the Kane mask. It's one of the coolest masks in wrestling history, both versions of it. I like the fact that a guy that probably should have had a 6-month to a year run ran for 20 years in the character. And yes, I know a lot of what Kane has done is based off of The Undertaker. But I would say, if you look at it, objectively, Kane wrestled a more grueling style for a longer period of time. He may have not had the accolades The Undertaker had, but he had some great matches with guys like Mysterio, Triple H, a lot of the same people Undertaker had great matches with. The difference for me with Kane is I think Kane's ability to reinvent himself, and not saying the Undertaker didn't, and Kane's ability to take something like Katie Vick and thrive through that, even though how terrible it was. I know this is highly unpopular. I know that most people, 99% of the people in the world, disagree with this. That's why it's on my list. That's why it's my number 3. With that being said, let's kick it back to George with the Cody shirt on for the rest of the list. We're going from that on number 2. Bill Goldberg sucks. Goldberg's never been entertaining. I've never liked many Goldberg matches. There are a few. His Halloween Havoc match with DDP I did like, but I'm going to say that's on DDP. A couple others sprinkled through his career. But to me, Goldberg was boring. He couldn't cut a promo. He was intense. I'll give him that. His intensity is rarely matched by anybody in wrestling. No question on that. His popularity, up there with some of the most popular wrestlers that ever did it. To me, he was absolutely boring. He was a channel change. I can't stand to see Goldberg on my television. When they bring Goldberg back now, I still don't want to see him. I get the same feelings about watching a Goldberg match as I would with some of the worst wrestling talent I've ever seen. I mean, to me, he's just boring. He's bland. I know a lot of people love him. That's why he's on my unpopular opinion list. Now, before I get to my number 1, I do a thing here called the best of rest, basically things that were considered for the list but didn't quite make it. First up, since 2007, TNA/Impact Wrestling has had a better women's division than any wrestling company in the world. Whether it be the era of Gail Kim and Awesome Kong, the Beautiful People, Mickie James, hell, even Taryn Terrell had the best part of her career in TNA/Impact Wrestling. I'm saying it's a continuation. Wrestlers like Deonna Purrazzo, now Masha Slamovich, even Naomi, who's came over there, are some of the best women's wrestlers in the world. It's been the most coherent division. It's been the best booked division year after year. Now, are there times where, like, WWE has some better women's matches for a short period of time? Of course. AEW's never gotten to the level of the women's division in TNA or Impact. I just think that they treat the women's division, and have always treated the women's division, with the care and the booking that it needs to make it successful. That's why I think, since 2007, no company holds a candle to TNA/Impact's women's division. Last but not least, on the best of the rest, this is a 2-for-1. The RKO, cutter, whatever you want to call it, and the DDT should always be finish moves. These are 2 of the more devastating moves in wrestling, or devastating looking. Think about this, like I talked about earlier with my comparisons to MMA. The Diamond Cutter, RKO, or Cody Cutter, or whatever your wrestler calls it that uses it. You're basically taking a person, holding their head, and driving their face into the mat. You shouldn't be able to get up from that. And I know there's other moves like the pile driver that probably should be on this list too, that people get up from. I just think the RKO and the DDT. The DDT, if done properly, is a devastating looking move. I mean, you're drilling someone's head into the concrete, or into the mat. Concrete if you're outside. I was just thinking about Jake doing it to Steamboat when I said that. But think of this. most of us did some quote-unquote backyard wrestling, whether it be legitimate, put-together backyard wrestling, or just goofing around with your brothers and sisters, or your neighbors, or your friends. Did you ever DDT somebody in the grass or on a bed? It's sketchy. Chances are you did some pretty bad damage. They either came up bloody or woozy, or maybe even knocked them out. I know I've done it to people. I know people have done it to me, and it hurt. It's something that you could see and you know hurts. Now, yeah, there are some people that do a sloppy-looking DDT. That is what it is. Other people like Moxley, who has a fantastic-looking DDT, the Dirty Deeds at times. I mean, Raven probably has the best DDT of all time. Him, Arn Anderson, and Jake are probably the three people in the conversation. Jake Roberts, of course, the guy that invented it. They're probably 3/4 of the Mount Rushmore. I don't know who you put on the fourth. Maybe it is Moxley. But it's a devastating move. Let's make it a finisher. Let's stop making it a transitional move. It's that good. I mean, maybe Dreamer. Dreamer, there you go. That's the fourth person for the Mount Rushmore. And fittingly, Raven and Tommy Dreamer are on the Mount Rushmore together. So the Mount Rushmore of DDTs are Jake Roberts, Arn Anderson, Raven, and Tommy Dreamer. Cutters? Let's see. I guess the Mount Rushmore of cutters would be, I'd go a Homicide, DDP, Randy Orton, of course. You gotta give it up to the guy that, I don't know if he really invented it, but he's the guy that popularized it, Johnny Ace, the Ace Crusher. I just think both these moves should only be used as finishers. Just my opinion. Again, unpopular it may be, but it's my opinion. Now, before I get to number one, normally I say if I put something too high, something too low, but these are all my opinions, so obviously you're going to have different opinions than me. Let me know one of your hot takes, one of your unpopular opinions down here in the comments. While you're there, smash the like button, share the video, subscribe if you haven't, and if you see where it says join, that's how you become a channel member. It would definitely help out my channel if you decided to do that. With all that being said, my number one controversial hot take, Jim Cornette is right more often than he's wrong. As someone who has put out a video in the past criticizing Jim Cornette and understanding there's some takes that Jim Cornette is very wrong about, I think more often than not, Jim Cornette's right about pro wrestling. Are some of his views a bit antiquated? Maybe. Like, for instance, I listen to his podcast every week, both of them. He absolutely destroys Jon Moxley. He hates Jon Moxley. I happen to find Jon Moxley to be one of the most entertaining wrestlers out there today. But then he has takes on guys like FTR, spot on. The Briscoes, spot on. His takes on Cody Rhodes at times, whether for or against him, have usually been pretty spot on. His takes on guys like CM Punk and MJF, dead right. More often than not, when he's reviewing a show, and there's people, I know when he's going to talk about somebody that I know he doesn't like, and I do, much like the Meltzer conversation earlier, I kind of take that with a grain of salt. So if he says something like Kenny Omega had a bad match, I take that with a grain of salt, because Jim just doesn't like Kenny Omega. Now, does that mean that Jim isn't a valuable person and probably smarter than 99% of people working in pro wrestling right now? No, it just means that we got different opinions on a few things. Has he said some controversial things, and do I think there's times where he plays up the Jim Cornette anti-person gimmick? Yeah, I definitely do. I definitely think there's some worker in there. I don't think that he's necessarily lying, but let's say someone like Orange Cassidy, who he's railed against, I don't necessarily think that Jim really hates Orange Cassidy as much as he plays up to. I think Jim has found his fans like when he talks about hating Orange Cassidy, and Orange Cassidy might be an annoyance to him. So does he dial that up for his fans? I think he does. But again, his takes on wrestling, more often than not, are right. Especially when we're talking about old school wrestling. I definitely tend to agree with him on anything prior to 1995. I mean, Jim Crockett Promotions was better than WWE. Mid-South was better than WWE. Memphis was better than WWE. I know I keep saying better than WWE. Better than AWA. I think the Midnight Express are one of the greatest tag teams of all time. Dead on. He's spot on with that. I think wrestlers that he idolizes like Terry Funk, Jerry Lawler, Ric Flair, people he doesn't say anything bad about, I think they're some of the greatest wrestlers of all time. Like I said, I agree with Jim Cornette more often than I don't, and I know there are some big differences, like the Elite. I love the Elite. He hates them. I get that. I think a little bit too often we're wrapped up in this hot take, and I'm making a video about hot takes, where you take a 30-second soundbite out of a 2-hour or 4-hour sometime podcast, and you go with that as the absolute opinion, where it's more complex than that at times. Just my opinion. I know it's probably the most unpopular one on here, That's why it's number 1. Again, if you made it to the end, let me know an unpopular wrestling opinion you have. Put it down here in the comments. With all that being said, my name is George Coles, and this has been another Heel Heat Top 10.